Hello again everyone, Mary Rose here at Stitch Bliss Corner, and I'm just doing a follow-up on Matisse. I've already put a video out on him, but it was quite long, and this book I was going to use as a reference through the video that I did, but time was just getting away in the last video, and I thought rather than stretch it even further, I would show you this book separately. So there might be repeating information in this for people who haven't seen the other video. And if anyone's got any questions or anything, just put them below and I'll answer to the best of my ability. So, you know, this won't be a full, you know, page by page flip through. It will just be to show you, you know, to keep it reasonably short. And I'm just going to go in basically because, as I say, this was part of the other one, and I was going to just pick it up and show you some of the pictures in there as I went along. But as it happened, it didn't work out that way. So I thought that I would just go through this book with you, and you can get a little bit more of the joy of this man from some of his works here. So here's the front cover. This is the World of Matisse, and it was a Time Life. It was from a Time Life series on the artists, and I've used them quite a lot. So inside the front cover there, I'll just find the information here. On the cover, a detail of Matisse's lush portrait of Princess Elena Galitzine, posed as an odalisque, reveals the painter's love of rich colour and bold decorative patterns. Well, he certainly loved his patterns, that's for sure. And then on the end papers, front and back, in these pen and ink drawings, Matisse combines several of the themes that preoccupied him during the happy period he spent in Nice between the two world wars. The room is bright with the southern sun. The pretty model reclines on a sofa. The artist himself appears in the picture, either reflected in a mirror, intent and bespectacled, or as a hand guiding a pen on paper in the back one. So here are the two sketches that this John Russell is the author of this book, and that's what he's referring to here. Is this beautiful sketch here. And here is the model. That is the back of her, and there's Matisse doing the actual drawing. So that's reflected in the mirror. So that's rather grand. And then here's the back picture, once again, of a reclining figure, and there's the reflection, and here's his hand here with the pen. He used to draw with biros as well, because they'd been invented towards the end of his life, and he used to use just ballpoint pens for some of his sketches. So now then, we'll just dip into the book now. There's a picture of Matisse and his mother, who influenced him on his painting. He didn't start painting until after he was 20. He had an attack of appendicitis, and also he was, I suppose, what you would call slightly highly strung in some ways. Not exactly that. It was more that life tended to weigh down on him a bit, I think. When he got the appendicitis, he sort of went to bed and sort of stayed there for a long time. He didn't really want to get up. And his mother gave him a set of paints and a little do-it-yourself book on how to paint. And he just loved it. He took to water. Took to water. He took to it like a fish to water. That's what I'm after. Oh dear. Anyway, he loved it. So when he'd recovered, he went off to, well, he'd already been to law school and everything. So his father wanted him to be a lawyer. But from the time that he got these paints, he decided that the legal life was not for him. So his father allowed him to go back to Paris and gave him a small allowance so that he could attend art school. So he went to this particular one, the Académie Julian, and just 1 year after he first picked up a paintbrush, Matisse, shown here flanked by 2 classmates, was accepted at the prestigious Académie Julian. But the Academy's staff, led by the award-winning painter Adolphe William Bouguereau, stressed painting in accepted modes. Matisse, disillusioned, left after 2 weeks. Well, I thought he was there for longer than that. So there's the picture there, and see how the teacher always wore these smocks and everything. Apparently the second teacher that Matisse had, he used to wear a little skull cap, and on a Wednesday, I think it was, that was the day that all the work was assessed, and he used to come round and make comments about where they could improve their technique and all that sort of thing. So then here it says, these 2 drawings done by Matisse 1891 at the Académie Julian reflect prevailing art school philosophy, excellence in making unimaginative copies from a cast at the top or nature. It was requirements such as having to sit through 20 classes on drawing plaster casts that prompted Matisse to leave the school and rebel against their dictum, copy nature doggedly. So, but I think he was, I mean, I don't want to question this book, but I have read that he stayed there for a year because he learnt all about plumb lines and everything. And unless they had a crash course that, in 2 weeks. But anyway, there's Matisse's drawings. There are Matisse's drawings. That's of the plaster cast head. And there's a life one. So that's from that academy. In 1892, Matisse began his studies under dapper Gustave Moreau. The above lithograph of Moreau by Matisse's classmate Georges Rouault was most likely inspired by the jaunty photograph at the top. Moreau's philosophy, which stressed personal vision above mere technical competence, strongly influenced the young Matisse. And of course, Gustave Moreau, the teacher, he was very religious. He had a very strong faith. And Rouault, I don't know how you say his name, he was an artist at the same time as Matisse. He was also very religious. And they got on very well together, those 2. Anyway, he's dapper, isn't he? Look at that bowler hat. And there's Rouault's picture. There's a lovely painting by Rouault of called The Old King. I used to love that too when I was a girl. Now, Gustave Moreau's class of 1897 poses on the steps of the Beaux-Arts college that he went to. That was the second one, the college that he managed to get in. Moreau said he could sit at the back of the class and he'd fix it up with administration later. Anyway, this is a mock serious portrait. One student at the upper left is solicitously helping the statue blow its nose. Rouault stands bewhiskered and bareheaded in the centre of the picture. This class was Moreau's last. He died the following year. So it'd be very hard for you to see here because it's hard enough for me to see. But there's, I think that's Rouault there. And up here, he's wiping the statue's nose. But I suppose it gives you an idea of what the students were like, that through the centuries, students seem to be the same with their irreverent, carryings on. Right, so we'll go on to the next. Well, this is enjoyable, actually. Now, I've marked this out. Matisse was impressed by the quality of the effort Rouault put into his painting, but he knew that he himself was not meant for such themes. His art was then, as it was to remain, entirely without any social or political or religious commitment. Matisse did not aspire to change society, or even to leave a portrait of it. No one ever heard him talk politics, and he lived and died an unbeliever. Excuse me. I do dispute that a little. I think there was a little bit in there, because they asked him if he believed in God at one stage, and he said, yes, when I work. So, I'm not sure about that little bit. Even at its most revolutionary, his art was traditional in subject matter. He painted pictures of family life, of tables laden with good things to eat and drink, of beautiful women taking their ease in beautiful surroundings. No one looking at a Matisse exhibition would guess that he lived during some of the most terrible years of human history, and that the world changed radically and irreversibly during the span of his lifetime. His paintings are, in a sense, portraits of an earthly paradise. So I marked that out just to mention for you. Right, the late beginner. The serious and poised Matisse painted this self-portrait in Paris in 1900, when he was 31 years old. He continued to observe and paint himself throughout his life in straightforward self-portraits, in deft crayon sketches, and as an artist with his model. So here's this. Oh, you must forgive my throat, I'm sorry. There he is. Wondering why that wasn't showing up. Okay. Now, Gustave Moreau, The Unicorns. This is just a picture just to show you what his art teacher could paint and how he painted. He stuck with the themes that the Salon in Paris used to really like their artists to send paintings like this, of mythology or historical scenes, or, celebrating that traditional life and all that sort of thing. We got cut off there, apparently. Anyway, carry on. Carmelina, 1903. Here's a painting that Matisse did, very different to the Moreau unicorn piece, as you can see. Carmelina. And as you can see, he's again reflected her, and he himself is in a red shirt there doing the painting. I mean, he obviously wanted to be noticed because he put the red shirt on. So that's that one. Now this one, too poor to hire a professional model, Matisse dressed his wife as a torero for this painting. As he struggled with the work, she grew tired in the awkward position and accidentally plucked the guitar strings. Matisse, angered by the distraction, kicked his easel and sent the painting flying. They both burst into laughter, breaking the tension and enabling Matisse to complete the work. And he did get very tense when he was painting, because he wanted to put onto the surface of whatever he was painting what he was seeing. And he had tremendous difficulty doing that. He had tremendous difficulty placing his image onto the page. And I think his models picked up on his stress. I think at one stage he said that he went somewhere and he was so stressed out the whole bed was shaking. And yet you wouldn't really think that, I don't think, in his everyday life. I think he looked cool, calm and collected, but inside, obviously, there was a lot going on. This photograph above was taken at the time of Matisse's wedding, when at the age of 29 he had doubts about continuing his painting, but not about his decision to marry Amélie Parayre. Sorry, I can't pronounce her name. P-A-R-A-Y-R-E. That was her last name. She was to him a person of great kindness, strength and gentleness. Their wedding took place on January the 8th, 1898, and for many years she lavished on Matisse a devotion that included equal parts of generous self-sacrifice and utmost practicality. So there he is there with his top hat. He looks quite dapper as well, doesn't he? And see what it says here. His successor at the Beaux-Arts Academy was Fernand Cormon, a painter of popular historical canvases. Cormon was appalled by Matisse's work in his classroom. "Is that man serious?" he asked. "How old is he?" On learning that the undeniably serious Matisse was going on 30 years old, he sent word that he would have to give way to a younger student. Gosh. And then there's a funny little bit here. He went and did some work for the Grand Palais, a huge exhibition hall then being built just off the Champs-Élysées. Much of it was hack work, gilding a cornice of laurel leaves, for example, but Matisse did it as conscientiously as he did everything else. Now, this is an example of how he had this calm surface, but every now and again something leaked out as to what was going on in his mind. His friend Marquet, who was also employed on the job, lacked Matisse's self-discipline. "Just think," he said, one morning shortly after they had begun, "another 7 hours to go," to which Matisse replied, "Say that again and I'll kill you." So, yeah, that's pretty good. Only when he was old, famous and totally sure of his art could Matisse bear to part with Cézanne's 3 Bathers, which he had bought from the dealer Vollard in 1899. Now, Vollard was a very famous art dealer, and he used to sell Cézanne's and all the artists. When he presented the small painting to the Petit Palais Museum, he expressed some of the deep feelings that had impelled him to purchase it originally and keep it close to him through all the subsequent years. "I have owned this canvas for 37 years. It has sustained me spiritually in the critical moments of my career as an artist. I have drawn from it my faith and my perseverance." And there it is there. That's just a little black and white of it. But he did love that painting. And I think it probably did give him courage and encouragement to keep going with his work, because he got a lot of criticism, a lot of derision, and a lot of people accusing him of, painting like a child, basically. And he had great technical skill. He could paint a rose as though you could pick it up off the page if he wanted to, but he didn't, because that wasn't what his mind was telling him to paint. So he stayed true to himself. I think that's the thing about Matisse. Okay, so I'll just have a little bit more here. Here's Vlaminck, who I think must have been a real character. Robust, individualistic Maurice Vlaminck, shown here in middle age with his pipe and huge palette, had a passion for painting, but did not seriously begin until he met André Derain, from whom he shared a ramshackle studio. To be a painter, he said, is not a business any more than to be an anarchist, lover, racer, dreamer, or prize fighter. There's Vlaminck there. And his canvases were an absolute riot of colour. And he was one of the Fauvist artists, one of the ones they called the wild beast. Excuse me. That had an exhibition in 1905 in room number 7 that people used to call the cage, because that's where all the wild beasts were showing their artwork of. André Derain was the son of a prosperous baker who wanted him to follow a respectable career, preferably engineering. I think it was either law, engineering, or medicine. That's what all the wealthy families wanted their children to go to. The young painter met enormous family opposition to his vocation until Matisse spoke so glowingly of Derain's talent and future prospects that the parents finally gave in, allowed Derain to devote himself to art. And he was another one of the wild beasts. We'll get to some pictures soon. Now, Matisse was very much influenced by Seurat, who was a pointillist and was very interested in the science of colour. And pointillism was where you put tiny little dots of colour together, and from a distance your eye would mix those primary colours into a colour. So it was just part of the science of vision, because of course this was all a time of great discovery and everything. So Seurat worked out divisionism or pointillism, a system of stippling the canvas with individual dots of pure complementary colours, red and green, for example. He did not mix pigments on a palette or combine them with his brush on the canvas, for he believed that the small dots, each the same size, laid precisely side by side, would combine themselves to reproduce the full range of natural colours in the viewer's eye. Later, Seurat made the system seem even more scientific by adding geometric rules. So Paul Signac, he was a devotee of Seurat. There's a picture here that he did with the pointillism. Then I'm really struggling with my throat. I'm very sorry. There's a couple of the Seurat paintings, which I've already shown in the other video. And here's Signac. Now Signac, when Seurat died, Signac did change his style a bit, because he realised that Seurat put out very few paintings in his life, and part of that was because the process took 2 years to do some of these paintings. So he did change his style a little bit to bigger blobs of colour so he could do more paintings. Now this is Lux Calme de l'Opte. This is Matisse's famous watershed painting, where he was influenced by the pointillism, but he was doing larger strokes, brush strokes. And once again, it's a scene from Matisse's point of view of a paradise by the sea. Right, now here is the painting that caused all the furore in the 1905 exhibition at the Salon. Now, the Matisse and the other artists that painted like him were given a room. They weren't part of the big galleries with all the huge, beautiful paintings, as was seen by the French viewing public. They saw them as the beautiful paintings of the classic scenes that I've mentioned before. Well, the group of painters that was sort of led by Matisse, because he was 10 years older than them, that was Vlaminck and Derain and a few others, they were allowed to have a room, room number 7, and people who'd been in there, the critics, they called it the cage, because they said the paintings were like wild beasts in there. There was a little statue of a Renaissance, I don't know what it was, a Cupidy looking statue anyway in the middle, that wasn't part of their exhibition, it was just there. And one critic said it was like Donatello among the wild beasts. And the one that was singled out for absolute fury and vengeance, well, not vengeance, but people were very angry about it. Because the thing is, in art in those days, they didn't have TV. And, you know, the evenings were spent around the piano singing, and there was reading, and poets were, you know, lots of poets around. People wanted to know what the latest poems were, you know, like, it was all, that was what their interest was, because what else was there to do? And so they took their art extremely seriously. And, you know, anyone that kicked against the pricks was considered to be a rebel, to be not decent in the way they lived their life. There was something the matter with them. So anyway, keep on rattling on, don't I? Matisse's arbitrary colours exasperated the Parisian art public when this portrait of the artist's wife was first shown at the Salon in 1905. In fact, so violent was the crowd's reaction that Matisse did not return to the show after his first visit. And this was called Woman with the Hat, Madame Matisse, 1905. So Amélie sat for this portrait. And of course the paintings were the wild beasts. That's where Donatello was surrounded by. There's another little drawing here. Matisse drew the fisherman, a pen and ink sketch of the curving beach at Bright in 1905, when he and the painter Derain spent the summer in the little fishing port of Collier. Derain is the faintly seen figure swimming merrily in the cove beyond the patient angler, one of the dozens of paintings and drawings that Matisse made at Collier during the many summer months he spent there. This amusing sketch was later a gift of the artist to his generous Russian patron, Shukin. And there is the angler there, and there's Derain swimming merrily. Okay, I'll just leave that just for a few more moments. Right. So, what else do we have here? Some of these pages are text only, so that's why I'm going through fairly quickly. Oh yes, no. Here are a couple of the other paintings of the wild beasts. There was Vlaminck, and there was Derain there. Maurice Vlaminck, portrait of Derain, and André Derain, portrait of Vlaminck. So they did each other's portraits. And Derain he's got a view of Collier 1905, and then Maurice Vlaminck Landscape with Red Trees, 1906. So there's Doran there. And there's the rather magnificent Flamenc, who boasted that he had never set foot in the Louvre. And he also said he loved Van Gogh more than his own father. That was what Flamenc said. Right, what have we got here? Right. Matisse expressed the visual excitement he felt in Morocco with the warm colours of this still life, painted during his second visit there. Lush and inviting, the fruit in the bowl is set off by a scattering of green leaves, while the flowered tablecloth and colourful background supply a touch of gaiety. And this is Oranges, 1912. And textile, designers of textiles and everything, they absolutely love Matisse's work because they're never short of an idea when they have a look at his beautiful paintings, the colours and everything. It just inspires them to this day. Now, it says here, 3 of Matisse's early backers were American spinsters who met him through the Steins. Claribel Cohn of Baltimore was strong-willed, one of the first women in America to graduate from medical school. Her sister Etta and a friend, Harriet Lane Levy of San Francisco, were more moderate, but all 3 were devoted to Matisse, buying from him confidently and ultimately enriching their hometown museums with their fine collections. I was going to say something then. Oh yes, Gertrude Sign, she was very keen on Picasso and his paintings in particular. And Leo, her brother, was more interested in the Matisse paintings. So here's Girl with Green Eyes, 1909, and the one next to that is The Pewter Jug, 1916 to 1917. And this one here, I thought it was interesting that I noticed here that he's got fruit there, and he's got this pewter jug, and I thought that looked like bananas. And he used to have recurring themes, the jug and some of his plates and the lamp and goldfish bowls and things used to repeatedly be shown in his paintings. Now this one here is a nice picture. To me, well, I'll tell you in a minute, of the many interior scenes with a view through an open window that Matisse painted, this is one of the finest, painted from his room in Nice, in the hotel. The picture documents Matisse's fascination with the bright Mediterranean light and the sharp contrasts it produced. Against the dazzling sea, the shuttered window and interior walls are black, while the painter's beloved violin glows like a jewel in its blue-lined case. Of course, Matisse practiced his violining every day. Violining, you know what I mean. And there's the water out there. He's just got the shutter open and that bright light coming through. And to me, it's sort of like he's just come in from, when you've been out and it's really bright outside and everything's a bit black when you first come in until your eyes adjust to the light. And that's what that makes me feel like anyway. So that's that one. Lovely picture. Now this is a picture of the mansion of Sergei Shukin. Now Shukin was a great patron of Matisse. He had pots of money, and he used to buy up pretty much anything he could lay his hands on. And the word in Paris at the time was there was a madman painting these works, and there was another madman that was buying them. It just took them a while. You know, I mean, you can think back and think, oh, you know, fancy them thinking that way. But of course, those times, it was only natural they'd be thinking that way, because, you know, a lot of people are conservative by nature. They don't want things to change. They want it to be how they always had it, and that's what they want. You know, it gives people a sense of security if they know that things aren't shifting and moving underneath them. Especially when there were such turbulent political times and fear of war starting, and actual war did start, you know, 2 wars. So, you know, these were times when people wanted to hold on to familiar things, not, you know, be confronted by things. Anyway, the section of this Matisse room that appears below shows a part of the great 20th century art collection as it was hung in the sumptuous 18th century Rococo interior of Shukin's home in pre-revolutionary Russia. And there's all those works on the walls there. And of course Shukin lost all his collection to the Bolsheviks after the Russian Revolution, and he was permitted to stay and as a caretaker to look after it for a while, but I think he ended up escaping. He went to Paris. At least that's where he died. Now there's a family photograph here of Matisse's eldest. Well, she had one daughter, Marguerite, and she wasn't Amelie's daughter. She was from a previous relationship, and he didn't marry that person, but Amelie and he brought her up, Marguerite, and his beloved daughter, and then his 2 sons, Pierre and Jean, in a little family photograph there. Now this is a very nice one. This is a lithograph of an odalisque made by Matisse in 1925. Repeats a pose that the artist interpreted in a variety of prints, drawings and sculpture, as well as painting. In all media, Matisse followed his rule that the simplest methods are those which best allow the painter to express himself. Odalisque in striped pantaloons, 1925. And I don't know, that reminds me of a snail shell, those pants. I mean, you know, that's that one. Marvelous. Large seated nude, 1925, and next to that is the decorative figure on an ornamental background, 1927. And there's the sculpture. I quite like that. I mean, she must have strong stomach muscles here to be in that angle. And there's all the incredible patterning and everything in this painting. He had a collection of rugs and brocades and textiles and everything that he used to take with him everywhere. This one, Odalisque in the red trousers, 1922. And these were all from his sketches and everything that he did in the brothels when he went to Morocco, he and his friend. The friend wasn't keen on going, and Matisse said, look, just pretend we're doctors making house calls, because he just wanted the atmosphere and everything. It was 10 years after that he actually painted these Moroccan women. Yeah. And there's just odalisque with striped dress 1937, which is the one that's on the cover. The bright decorative effect of Matisse's work in the 1930s is seen in this portrait of his secretary Lydia Delektorskaya, starting with a conventional pose on a graceful love seat. Matisse let the floor swoop up at the sides of the picture, flattening the space between the figure and the wall, and simplified all the shapes until the voluminous blue gown is complemented by a design of high intensity red, black, and yellow. And this is called Lady in Blue, 1937. Now, Matisse left. He had a series of nude, black and white photographs taken of each of the 22 versions of his painting Pink Nude. So what he did, he kept on simplifying the image that he was doing. So he started with a fairly detailed picture of the figure, and then as time went by, he took less and less, or I should say, as time went by, he took more and more detail out to simplify the image to the final result. And this was Lydia, she was the model for this. And all the photographs there, from 1 right the way through till 22, and it just shows the continuance of his artistic ability here, where he's introduced patterning as well as it goes along. So there's quite a bit of detail up here in the image, and then as he goes along, he takes out more details of the nude and puts more detail into the background, really. But he used photography to help him, I guess, or at least to record his progress through the painting to the final one here. And I remember this being in my high school. I mean, I don't know who picked the paintings for my high school, but they were pretty good, because a lot of them I still remember. You know, they did a good job. Red Still Life with Magnolia, 1941. There's that jug again that had the bananas reflecting. Painted when Matisse was almost 80 years old, this portrait of the interior of his studio is his last great oil painting. Unified with a vibrant red, the scene is bright with the artist's sense of humour beside one of Matisse's own paintings in the upper right. The view through an open window appears as flat as if it were too painted. Beneath the table, in the lower right, a calico cat is chased by a dog, both as abstract as patterns on a carpet. Red interior, 1948. And they do look a bit like carpets, don't they? That's the cat and the dog. Oh, here's this portrait of Edgar Allan Poe. And anyone who's seen Edgar Allan Poe's photographs or anything, that is quite a likeness of him. And here he is. Now this is the second part, the last part of his life. He was very interested in cutouts, paper cutouts, And because he had problems painting and everything because of his infirmity, he just chose another medium. And he basically said he was painting with paper now. And he used to get his assistants to paint paper a colour that he liked, and then he would cut out this paper with these large tailor scissors. And he didn't have any, he seemed like as soon as he started cutting, he knew exactly the shape that he was going to be cutting out. And here he is with all the pieces of paper around him, cutting out for his figures. And I'll show you a bit of that just now. Hello, dear. I'm just doing a video. It's all right. Yeah. The mechanics of his method were fairly simple. Matisse had sheets of paper painted under his direction and then cut into them with shears in a way that was half drawing, half sculpting. When he had the exact forms he wanted, he told an assistant where to put them. When all the pieces of paper were placed to his liking, he had them fastened onto canvas. The result was art of a peculiarly exhilarating sort. Sometimes the cut-out compositions were related to his earlier work, sometimes not. So anyway, here, carving with colour. Matisse's quest for simplicity found expression in this paper cutout of a female nude done in 1950 when the artist was 81. It is a huge picture, almost 8 feet high, its character reflecting Matisse's admiration of prehistoric and primitive art, whose bold, abstract qualities had long fascinated him. It's called Zoma, 1950. Matisse had experimented with cutouts for several years, but it was not until 1947, when he published a book called Jazz, that he proved he had mastered his new art form. Jazz, which took about 3 years to complete, is a collection of abstracted coloured cutouts like those shown here. It includes a text written by Matisse and printed in his own commanding longhand script. The text, unrelated to the cutouts, consists of gentle truths and observations about art and life. Chatty but incisive, it is intended mainly to provide the viewer's eyes with a rest from the dazzling art. About the book itself, Matisse wrote, "The images in vivid and violent tones have resulted from crystallizations in memories of the circus, popular tales, or travel." These were his inspirations, but as he worked, he became aware of an affinity between the lyrical quality of his pictures and the soaring improvisations of jazz music, thus the title of the book. So here's some of the images of jazz. These paper cutouts. And Icarus in the previous video is part of this. Christmas Night and Ivy and Flower. These are some more of his cutouts. You can see how he has influenced the modern world. Here is the parakeet and the siren, or the mermaid. I've shown this one before, but this is the parakeet here, and there's the mermaid. And you can see it's a vast work. There's a chair. So you can see just how big this work is. Matisse remained active until the day he died, although during his last 2 years he was confined mostly to his bed. So here he is working, sitting in his bed. We'll just see what it says here. This is just the last little bit of the book. It says, Matisse remained active until the day he died, although during his last 2 years he was confined mostly to his bed. There in his Riviera quarters, a scarf around his neck, wearing a faded grey sweater and peering through gold-rimmed glasses, he worked. When he was allowed to leave his bed, it was often to sit in a special chair placed before one of his last cutouts, a mammoth design for either a stained glass window or a ceramic mural. He was too weak to rise. After he cut his figures or arabesques from the coloured paper, he would tell Lydia Delektorskaya where to place each one. To alter his routine, he might model in clay, or return to the medium he understood so well, or he would draw while in bed, his charcoal pencil fixed to the end of a long bamboo pole. In this way he completed many large sketches on paper pinned to the walls, as well as simple line drawings made directly on his walls and ceiling. Surrounded as he was by the faces he had drawn, Matisse said in his last days, "I am never alone." Anyway, this has been quite a little episode. There will be a few cuts here and there, in this video, but it won't be anything that that you won't feel robbed, I don't think, because there'll be plenty there for you to have a look at. Anything that is a bit confusing or anything like that, if you look at my other video, you should be able to find the answer. So that was the book, and I shall catch you later. Look after yourselves, everyone. Bye.